I watched my sister's hair fall out in clumps during her wedding reception, and I smiled into my champagne glass. Let me rewind. My name is Emma Chen, and 6 months ago, I died at 24 years old. Anaphylactic shock from a severe allergic reaction caused by contaminated conditioner. The conditioner my sister Claire had secretly replaced with a cheap knockoff brand she'd mixed with God knows what just to save a few dollars while using my expensive products. She'd been doing it for months, gradually adding more of her concoction to my bottles. That day, she'd gotten careless, and whatever she'd mixed in finally killed me. I remember clutching my throat in our shared bathroom, unable to breathe, watching her through blurring vision as she stood in the doorway. She didn't call for help, she just watched, waited. And when I collapsed, the last thing I heard was her voice on the phone with her boyfriend, Marcus. "It's done. The apartment is all mine now." Then darkness, then light. Then I was 17 again, waking up in my childhood bedroom 7 years before my death. The knowledge of those 7 years hit me like a freight train. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every moment of cruelty from my family, especially from Claire, flooded back with crystal clarity. But this time, I had something I didn't have before: the power to change everything. Let me explain how I got here, how I ended up as the family scapegoat while Claire became the golden child. Our mother, Patricia Chen, was a former beauty queen who never quite got over losing her crown. She'd pinned all her hopes on having a daughter who could live out her dreams. When Claire was born first, beautiful even as a baby with her wide eyes and porcelain skin, Mom was ecstatic. I came along 2 years later, and while I wasn't ugly, I wasn't Claire. I was adequate, forgettable. The understudy who should have been grateful just to be on the same stage. Dad, Richard Chen, was a successful corporate lawyer who'd inherited a property development company from his father. He'd loved me once, I think, when I was very small. But Mom's constant comparisons and Claire's theatrical neediness gradually shifted his attention. By the time I was 10, I was invisible unless I'd done something wrong. Claire learned early that she could get away with anything. She'd break my toys and I'd get punished for leaving them where she could accidentally step on them. She'd fail tests and I'd have to tutor her for hours, sacrificing my own study time. She'd steal money from my piggy bank and Mom would praise her for being resourceful. In my previous life, I'd endured it all silently, desperately trying to be good enough, perfect enough, to earn even a scrap of love from my parents. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for community college because Dad refused to pay my tuition while simultaneously dropping $100,000 on Claire's fashion merchandising degree at a private university. I'd lived in a tiny studio apartment eating ramen while Claire got a luxury 2-bedroom in the city, until she'd convinced me to be her roommate under the guise of sisters sticking together, really just wanting someone to pay half her rent while she blew her allowance on designer clothes. I'd worked my way up to assistant manager at a tech startup, pouring my heart into my career, only to have Claire charm my boss and get hired as a social media consultant at twice my salary despite having no experience. She'd started dating Marcus, the company's lead developer, who I'd quietly loved for 2 years. She'd known, of course. That's why she'd targeted him. Everything I had, she took. Everything I built, she destroyed. And when I'd finally saved enough to afford nice things, good skincare, quality hair products, a small but real diamond necklace my grandmother had left me, she'd stolen those too. Used them, broke them, ruined them. The conditioner that killed me, I'd saved for 3 months to buy that Salon exclusive brand. It was the one luxury I'd allowed myself, the one thing that made me feel pretty when I looked in the mirror. Claire had used it without asking, as always, but that time she'd taken the bottle back to our apartment and refilled it with cheap drugstore conditioner mixed with something. In my past life, I'd never found out what. The autopsy showed multiple chemical compounds that suggested she'd mixed several products together, probably trying to stretch my expensive conditioner with cheap alternatives and some of her own hair treatments. The reaction had been catastrophic. But the worst part? No one believed it was anything but an accident. Claire had played the grieving sister perfectly, even giving a tearful eulogy about how close we'd been. She'd kept my diamond necklace, moved her boyfriend into my room within a week, and never looked back. But now I was 17 again. It was August, just before senior year of high school. Claire was 19, home from her first year of college for the summer, and everything that had happened before hadn't happened yet. The advantage was all mine. I spent the first week of my rebirth just observing, cataloging the differences and similarities to my memories. Some things were exactly the same. Claire's casual cruelty, mom's favoritism, dad's disinterest. Other things were opportunities I'd missed the first time, chances I'd been too beaten down to see. The catalyst came on a Saturday morning when I caught Claire in my room, using my hair straightener. Nothing expensive yet. I was 17. I didn't have money for luxury products, but it was mine, and she knew it, and she was using it anyway. Claire, please don't use my things without asking, I said, keeping my voice level. She didn't even look up. It's just a straightener, Emma. Don't be selfish. In my previous life, I'd backed down, apologized even. This time I walked over and unplugged it. It's mine, buy your own. She whirled on me, eyes wide with shock. Claire wasn't used to me saying no. What is your problem? My problem is that you think everything I own is yours. It's not. Mom, Claire shrieked, storming past me. Emma's being a bitch. I followed her downstairs calmly. Mom was in the kitchen, and her face was already set in disapproving lines when she saw me. Emma, why are you being difficult? It's just a hair straightener. It's my hair straightener, Mom. If Claire wants one, she can use her allowance to buy one. She shouldn't have to buy one when there's a perfectly good one in the house, Mom snapped. Stop being so petty. This was the pattern. This was how it had always been. But I had 7 years of memories now, 7 years of watching this dynamic destroy me. I wasn't going to let it happen again. Then you buy her one, Mom, with your money, not mine. I turned and walked back upstairs, ignoring Claire's dramatic sobbing and Mom's outraged sputtering. That night, I logged into my email, the same email address I'd had in my previous life, and started setting up accounts I'd need. I created a new social media presence under a pseudonym. I researched the stock market, noting the dates of every major shift I could remember. I made lists of inventions that would come out in the next 7 years, business ideas that would explode, social media platforms that would rise and fall. But most importantly, I started planning for Claire. See, I knew her better than anyone. I knew her patterns, her weaknesses, her vanities. I knew exactly how she'd react to any given situation because I'd lived through it all before. She was predictable in her cruelty, and that predictability would be her downfall. The next few months were about positioning. I became the perfect daughter on the surface, polite, studious, never arguing with Mom's favoritism or Dad's neglect. I kept my head down at school, got straight A's, and started building resources. I got a job at a local cafe, but I also started doing freelance graphic design online, using skills I'd learned in my previous life. I created a portfolio under a fake name and started taking commissions. Within 3 months, I had $5,000 saved. By Christmas, I had $12,000. I watched Claire coast through her sophomore year of college on Dad's money, partying and posting endless photos of her amazing life on social media. I watched her bring home a parade of boyfriends, each one more pretentious than the last. I watched Mom fawn over every mediocre accomplishment while ignoring my perfect grades and growing bank account. And I waited. The key thing I remembered from my previous life was timing. There were certain pivotal moments where Claire's cruelty had done the most damage, and those were the moments I needed to be ready for. The first major confrontation came in the spring of my senior year. I'd been accepted to 3 universities with full academic scholarships, something I'd also achieved in my previous life, though no one in my family had cared enough to celebrate. This time, I made sure to mention it at dinner. "That's wonderful, honey," Dad said absently, not looking up from his phone. 3 scholarships, I emphasized. Full tuition, room, and board. Claire looked up from her plate, a calculating expression crossing her face. "That's great, Em. Hey, since you won't need money for college, maybe you could help me out. I'm a little short on rent this month." "No," I said simply. The word hung in the air. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "What did you say?" Claire asked, her voice dangerously sweet. I said no. I worked for my scholarships. "You have an allowance and Dad pays your rent. Manage your money better." "Emma!" Mom stood up, her face flushed with anger. Your sister is asking for help and you're going to refuse her? Yes. Dad finally looked up, frowning. Don't be difficult, Emma. Family helps family. The irony of that statement, from a man who'd refused to help me at all in my previous life, would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. Then you help her, Dad. Give her more money. But I'm keeping what I earned. I left the table and went to my room, locking the door behind me. I could hear Claire crying downstairs, Mom comforting her, both of them talking about how selfish I'd become. Dad's deeper voice joined in, agreeing that I'd changed, and not for the better. Good. Let them think I'd changed. Let them think I was the problem. Because while they were focused on my attitude, they weren't paying attention to what I was actually doing. I graduated as valedictorian, another thing I'd done in my previous life that had gone uncelebrated. This time, Claire made sure to steal the spotlight by announcing her engagement that same day. She'd gotten back together with her high school boyfriend, Tyler, a trust fund kid whose parents owned a chain of car dealerships. The engagement wasn't real love. I knew from my previous life that they'd break up within 6 months, but it was enough to make my graduation all about her. Fine, I smiled for the photos, gave my speech, and accepted my scholarship to the same university I'd attended before. But this time, I wasn't going for a generic business degree. This time, I was going into computer science with a minor in business, because I knew exactly which tech companies would boom and which would bust. That summer before college, I worked constantly. 2 jobs plus my freelance design work. I was saving every penny I could because I knew what was coming. In my previous life, I'd spent my college years struggling financially, taking loans, working myself to exhaustion. This time would be different. Claire's fake engagement to Tyler fell apart in July, exactly as I'd remembered. She came home crying, expecting sympathy. Mom gave it to her in spades, taking her shopping for therapy retail, spending thousands of dollars of Dad's money on clothes and jewelry. I stayed in my room, coding and designing, building my savings. Then August came and everything began to align. In my previous life, I'd started college with nothing, a beat-up laptop, cheap clothes, and a mountain of anxiety. This time, I had $25,000 saved, a top-of-the-line laptop I'd bought with my freelance earnings, and a plan. I moved into my dorm early and immediately started positioning myself. I joined the tech club, the business fraternity, and started networking with professors. I used my knowledge from my previous life to ace every test, impress every instructor, and build a reputation as a prodigy. But I also kept tabs on Claire. She'd started her junior year with a new major, her third one, this time in marketing. She'd moved into an expensive off-campus apartment that Dad was paying for, and she'd started dating a new guy, Marcus Williams, a senior in computer engineering. Marcus. The man I'd loved in my previous life, the man she'd stolen from me, the man who'd helped her dispose of my things after I died. This time, I wasn't interested in him romantically. This time, I knew exactly who he was. An opportunist who'd choose whoever offered the easiest path to success. In my previous life, that had been Claire with her connections and her father's money. This time, I'd make sure those connections burned her instead of helped her. I focused on my studies and my side businesses. I'd started 3 different ventures, a freelance design agency, a social media consulting firm, and, most importantly, I'd begun investing. I knew which stocks would soar and which would crash. I knew which cryptocurrencies would explode and which would vanish. By Christmas of my freshman year, I'd turned my $25,000 into $75,000. Claire, meanwhile, was floundering. She'd failed 2 classes, and Dad was finally putting his foot down about her spending. She called me once during finals week, asking to borrow $500. No, I said, come on, Emma, I'm your sister. I'm desperate. Get a job. She hung up on me. Mom called me an hour later, furious, demanding to know why I was being so cruel to my sister. I told her the same thing. Claire needed to learn to manage her money. Mom called me heartless and hung up too. I didn't care. I was building something they couldn't touch, and every time they tried to drag me down, I climbed higher. The real turning point came in my sophomore year. I was 19, Claire was 21, and I'd been carefully laying the groundwork for everything to come. I'd started a tech company with 2 friends from my program. We'd developed an app, something simple but addictive, a productivity tool that I knew from my previous life would have mass appeal. We launched it in January, and by March, we had 50,000 users. By May, we had 500,000. We sold the company in July for $2 million. My share was 600,000. I was 19 years old, a rising junior in college, and I was a millionaire. I didn't tell my family. I kept living in my modest apartment near campus, kept dressing in normal clothes, kept acting like a regular college student, but I'd moved my money into investments, into property, into assets they couldn't see or touch. Claire, meanwhile, had graduated, barely, with her marketing degree. She'd moved back home and was looking for opportunities, which meant she was sleeping until noon and spending Dad's money at the mall. She'd broken up with Marcus after he'd graduated and moved across the country for a job, and she was dating a new guy every week. But I knew what was coming. In my previous life, this was when Claire had gotten lucky. She'd landed a social media job at a trendy startup, charmed her way into a promotion, and used her position to make connections that she'd later leveraged to steal my job and my boyfriend. This time, I was going to make sure that startup didn't want her at all. The company was called Trendset Media, and I remembered exactly when they'd posted their job listing. I also remembered that Claire had gotten the job because the hiring manager, a woman named Jessica, had been charmed by her bubbly personality and social media presence. So I made sure Jessica saw a different side of Claire first. I created fake social media accounts, untraceable, carefully crafted, and started leaving negative reviews on every post Claire made. Nothing too obvious, just enough to make her look controversial. I hacked her Instagram, easy since she used the same password for everything, her birthday, and changed her privacy settings so her party photos, the really embarrassing ones, were public instead of private. Then I applied to Trendset Media myself, using a pseudonym and a separate portfolio. I interviewed, impressed them, and casually mentioned during my second interview that I'd heard they were considering another candidate who might not be the best culture fit. "Oh?" Jessica asked. "Who?" "Claire Chen. I went to school with her. She's got a good social media presence, but a lot of it is pretty superficial, and she has a reputation for being difficult to work with." I showed Jessica some of Claire's public posts, the ones where she'd complained about her professors, insulted her classmates, and generally showed her true colors. Jessica's expression grew more and more concerned. "I appreciate you telling me," she said. "We'll definitely take that into consideration." Claire didn't get the job. She also didn't get the next 3 jobs she applied for because I made sure that every company she targeted saw exactly who she really was. By fall, she was desperate and furious. She started posting on social media about how unfair the job market was, how nobody appreciated real talent, how she was being discriminated against. It was pathetic and very public, and it made her look even worse to potential employers. Mom called me in October demanding that I use my connections to help Claire find a job. "What connections?" I asked innocently. "Don't play dumb, Emma. I know you know people. You've been networking since you started college. Help your sister." "Mom, I'm a student. I don't have the kind of connections that could help Claire. She needs to keep applying and building her skills." "She has skills. She just needs someone to give her a chance." "Then she should keep trying. That's what I did." Mom hung up on me. Again. The next part of my plan required patience. I knew from my previous life that Claire's desperation would eventually lead her to make a very specific choice. She'd convinced Dad to invest in her business idea, a boutique selling curated fashion pieces. In my previous life, Dad had given her $50,000, which she'd blown through in 6 months, leaving him with nothing but debt and a warehouse full of unsold inventory. This time, I was going to make sure that investment went very differently. I waited until Thanksgiving, when the whole family was together. Claire was on her 3rd glass of wine and complaining about the job market when Dad, looking tired, suggested she start her own business. "Really?" Claire lit up. "Yes? You'd help me?" "Maybe," Dad said cautiously, "if you have a real business plan." I watched this play out exactly as it had before, but this time I was ready. "That's a great idea, Claire," I said. "Have you thought about what kind of business?" She launched into her boutique idea, the same one from my previous life. Designer resale, curated pieces, exclusive collections. It sounded good on the surface, but I knew the reality. She had no business sense, no work ethic, and no ability to manage money. That sounds ambitious, I said. You'd need a lot of startup capital, and you'd need to really understand the market, profit margins, inventory management, customer acquisition costs. Claire waved her hand dismissively. I know fashion. That's all I need. Fashion knowledge is important, I agreed. But have you done any market research? Analyzed your competition? Created financial projections? I'll figure it out as I go. Dad frowned. Emma has a point, Claire. You need a real business plan if you want me to invest. Fine, Claire snapped. I'll make a business plan. Emma, since you're so smart about this stuff, why don't you help me? This was exactly what I'd been waiting for. Sure, I said, I'd be happy to help. Over the next month, I helped Claire create a business plan. But unlike in my previous life, where she'd done everything sloppily and Dad had still given her money out of guilt, this time I made sure every flaw was documented, every risk was highlighted, every red flag was waving. I also made sure to get everything in writing. When Claire presented her plan to Dad in December, it was a disaster. Oh, it looked professional. I'd made sure of that, but the numbers told the real story. The business would lose money for at least 2 years, required a minimum investment of $75,000, and had a 70% chance of failure based on market analysis. Dad read through it slowly, his frown deepening with each page. Claire, this isn't viable, he said finally. What? No, Emma helped me with this. It's perfect. The numbers don't work. The market is too saturated. You'd be competing against established businesses with much deeper pockets. Claire turned on me, her face ugly with rage. You sabotaged me. I helped you create an honest business plan, I said calmly. If the numbers don't work, that's not my fault. That's the reality of the business you want to start. You bitch. Claire, Dad barked. That's enough. But Claire was spiraling. You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand that I'm prettier, that people actually like me. Claire, I interrupted, my voice ice cold. I'm not jealous of you. I don't want to be you. I just don't want Dad to waste his money on a business that will fail. The room went silent. Mom looked like she wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. Dad was staring at the business plan, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. For the first time in my life, he was really seeing Claire clearly. Emma's right, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Claire. I can't invest in this. Claire exploded. She screamed. She cried. She threw the business plan across the room. She called me every name she could think of, accused me of ruining her life, and stormed out of the house. Mom ran after her, shooting me a venomous look on her way out. Dad stayed at the table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Did I do the right thing? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. You did. He looked at me for a long moment. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Dad. You just never noticed. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was too little. Too late. I didn't need his approval anymore. I went back to school in January and continued building my empire. I'd invested my money wisely, and my portfolio was growing exponentially. I'd also started consulting for several tech companies, using my knowledge from my previous life to help them avoid pitfalls and capitalize on opportunities. By the time I turned 20, I was worth $3 million. Claire, meanwhile, was unraveling. Without Dad's investment, she'd tried to start her boutique with credit cards. She'd maxed out 3 cards in 2 months and had nothing to show for it except a storage unit full of overpriced clothes she couldn't sell. She'd gotten a job at a retail store, barely above minimum wage, and was living back in her childhood bedroom, seething with resentment. She started showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with some excuse. She needed to borrow something. She wanted to hang out. She just happened to be in the neighborhood. But I knew what she was really doing. She was looking for things to take, opportunities to exploit, ways to drag me down to her level. I never let her pass the doorway. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the conditioner incident. In my previous life, this had happened when I was 24, living with Claire as roommates, trapped in her web of manipulation. This time, it happened when I was 22, and I'd just moved into a beautiful two-bedroom apartment in a luxury building downtown. Claire had been pestering me to let her move in, claiming she couldn't afford her rent anymore. I'd refused, of course, but she'd managed to get a copy of my key, probably stole it during one of her uninvited visits, and I'd come home one afternoon to find her in my bathroom, using my expensive hair products. "Claire, what the hell are you doing here?" She jumped, dropping the bottle of conditioner I'd just bought, a luxury brand that cost $80. "Jesus, Emma, you scared me." "You broke into my apartment." "I didn't break in. I used my keys." "You don't have a key. You stole mine." I held out my hand. "Give it back." "God, why are you being so paranoid? I'm your sister. I just needed to take a shower. You have a home, Claire. With a shower, get out." Her face morphed from fake innocence to pure hatred. "You think you're so much better than me now, don't you? With your fancy apartment and your perfect life?" "I don't think I'm better than you. I just don't want you stealing my things anymore." "Stealing? I never stole it." "Yes, you did. You've been stealing from me our entire lives. My toys, my money, my clothes, my opportunities, and I'm done letting you." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something nasty and low. "You know what your problem is, Emma? You're bitter. You've always been bitter that Mom and Dad love me more." In my previous life, those words would have destroyed me. This time, I just smiled. "They don't love you more, Claire. They just enabled you more. There's a difference. And now look at you, 23 years old, working retail, living with your parents, stealing from your little sister because you can't afford your own conditioner." I watched the words hit her like physical blows. Her face went red, then white. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I said. "Now get out." She left, but I knew this wasn't over. Claire didn't handle rejection well, and she definitely didn't handle being shown up. In my previous life, this kind of confrontation would have led to her replacing my conditioner with a contaminated version, which would lead to my death. This time, I was ready. I installed cameras in every room of my apartment, hidden, high-quality cameras that fed to a cloud server. I also changed all my locks and made sure Claire couldn't get another key. But most importantly, I set a trap. I bought the same expensive conditioner I'd had in my previous life and left it prominently displayed in my bathroom. But I also made sure to keep my actual conditioner, a different brand, locked in my bedroom safe. If Claire wanted to tamper with my products, she'd be tampering with a decoy. It took 2 weeks. I came home from work one evening and checked my camera feeds. There she was, clear as day, breaking into my apartment through the bathroom window, which I'd deliberately left unlocked. She went straight to my bathroom and opened the conditioner bottle. She took out a plastic bag filled with white powder and a bottle of something I couldn't identify, and she carefully mixed them into the conditioner. I watched her do it in real time, sitting in my car in the parking garage, my hands shaking with a mixture of fury and vindication. She was trying to kill me again, just like before. The only difference was that this time, I'd made sure she couldn't succeed. I let her finish and leave. Then I waited another hour before going inside, making sure the cameras caught everything clearly. I called the police, showed them the footage, and had the conditioner tested. The results came back 3 days later. The bottle contained a mixture of cheap conditioner, industrial cleaning chemicals, and a compound that, when mixed with certain hair products, would cause severe burns and potential systemic toxicity. If someone with certain allergies, like mine, had used it, they would have had a severe, potentially fatal reaction, just like in my previous life. The police arrested Claire that evening. Mom called me immediately, screaming about how I'd set Claire up, how I was a monster. How could I do this to my own sister? "She tried to poison me," I said calmly. That's ridiculous. She would never eat. There's video evidence, Mom. And the bottle tested positive for industrial chemicals. She was trying to hurt me. "You must have planted." I hung up on her. I was done explaining, done defending, done trying to make her see the truth. The trial took 6 months. Claire's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been trying to prank me, that she hadn't known the chemicals would be dangerous. But the prosecution had my testimony about her previous behavior, the video evidence, the chemical analysis, and testimony from the company that made the industrial cleaner, a type used for removing heavy-duty adhesives that came with explicit warnings never to use it on skin. Claire was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Mom and Dad attended every day of the trial, sitting on Claire's side of the courtroom, glaring at me as I testified. When the verdict came down, Mom collapsed in the hallway, sobbing. Dad just looked broken. He approached me outside the courthouse. Emma, I don't understand. How did it come to this? It came to this because you let Claire think she could do anything without consequences, I said. You enabled her cruelty, ignored her stealing, and taught her that she was more important than everyone else. This is the result. She's your sister. She tried to kill me, Dad. She put poison in my conditioner. If I'd used it, I'd be dead. He had no response to that. What could he say? I walked away from the courthouse and never looked back. Over the next 2 years, I continued building my empire. I started another company, sold it for $5 million. I invested in real estate, buying properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. I consulted for Fortune 500 companies. By the time I was 24, the age I died in my previous life, I was worth $15 million. I also met someone. His name was David, and he was nothing like Marcus. He was a professor of literature, kind and thoughtful, and completely uninterested in money or status. He loved me for who I was, not what I could do for him. We dated for a year, and he proposed on my 24th birthday. I said yes. We got married 6 months later, a small ceremony with his family and a few close friends. My parents weren't invited. They'd tried to reconcile after Claire's conviction, sending letters and making phone calls, but I'd ignored them all. They'd had 24 years to choose me, and they never had. I wasn't giving them another chance. But karma wasn't done with them yet. Dad's property development company had been struggling for years, something I'd known from my previous life but had never fully understood. He'd made bad investments, over-leveraged his assets, and trusted the wrong partners. In my previous life, the company had gone bankrupt when I was 26, leaving my parents destitute. This time, I made sure it happened faster. I used my connections and my knowledge of his business deals to systematically undermine every venture he touched. I bought out his partners, outbid him on properties, and spread quiet words in the right circles about his financial instability. Within a year of Claire's conviction, his company was in freefall. He declared bankruptcy when I was 25. They lost the house I'd grown up in, where Claire had been princess and I'd been the scapegoat. They lost their cars, their savings, their social standing. They moved into a tiny apartment in a bad neighborhood, and Dad took a job as a public defender, making a fraction of what he used to earn. Mom, who'd never worked a day in her life, got a job as a receptionist at a dental office. I heard about all of this through mutual acquaintances, people who didn't know the history and assumed I'd want to help. I didn't. I'd offered them chances to be better, to see me, to love me. They'd chosen Claire every single time. They'd chosen their pride and their delusions over their daughter. Now they could live with the consequences. Claire got out of prison when I was 28. She was 30, and prison had not been kind to her. Her beauty, the weapon she'd always relied on, was gone. Her hair, which had once been her pride, was thin and damaged. She'd gained weight, her skin was bad, and she looked a decade older than she was. She tried to contact me first thing. I blocked her. She tried showing up at my office. I'd founded my own tech company by then, a major player in the AI space. Security escorted her out and filed a restraining order. She tried going to David. That was a mistake. David, who knew everything about my history, who'd held me through nightmares about my previous life, who'd supported me through the trial, took one look at Claire and called the police for violation of the restraining order. She spent another 6 months in jail. When she got out the second time, she'd finally learned. She didn't contact me again. I heard she was living with Mom and Dad, working as a night janitor at an office building, trying to scrape together enough money to survive. I heard she'd tried to restart her boutique idea and failed. I heard she'd applied to dozens of jobs in her field and couldn't get hired because of her criminal record. I heard all of this, and I felt nothing. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe in my previous life, the Emma who'd died at 24 would have felt sorry for her, would have wanted to help. But I wasn't that Emma anymore. I was someone who'd been given a second chance. someone who'd learned that mercy to your abusers was just another form of self-destruction. The final piece of my revenge came when I was 30. Mom and Dad were struggling badly. Dad had health problems, stress-related, the doctor said, and couldn't work full-time anymore. Mom's receptionist job barely covered their rent. They were looking at homelessness, at losing everything. They reached out to me through a lawyer, not to apologize, not to make amends, but to ask for money. They wanted me to support them, to give them a monthly allowance, to buy them a house. The audacity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so perfectly in character. I met with the lawyer in my office, a sleek space on the 30th floor of a downtown high-rise. The lawyer, a nervous young man who clearly didn't want to be there, presented their case. Your parents are in difficult circumstances. I know. They're requesting financial assistance. No. He blinked. Ms. Chen, I don't think you understand. They're your parents. They could pursue legal action. On what grounds? I don't owe them anything. They didn't pay for my education, they didn't support me as an adult, and they chose my sister over me at every opportunity, including when she tried to murder me. That's a harsh way to put it. It's accurate. Is there anything else? He fumbled with his papers. They wanted me to mention that they're family, that family should help each other. I laughed. Actually laughed. Family helps each other? Where was that philosophy when I was working 3 jobs to put myself through community? Was college? Where was it when Claire was stealing from me? Where was it when I testified against her and they called me a liar? Ms. Chen, tell my parents that if they need money, they can ask Claire. I'm sure she'll be happy to help. I stood up. We're done here. The lawyer left, and I never heard from them again. But the universe wasn't done giving me gifts. When I was 32, I got a call from a lawyer representing my grandmother's estate. My maternal grandmother, who I barely remembered, she'd died when I was 7. Apparently, she'd left a trust that would mature when I turned 32, and I was the sole beneficiary. The trust was worth $2 million. The lawyer explained that my grandmother had set it up specifically with instructions that Mom couldn't touch it, that it could only go to me. She'd apparently seen how her daughter treated her granddaughters and had made sure that I, at least, would have something. I sat in the lawyer's office looking at the paperwork and felt tears sliding down my face for the first time in years. Someone had seen me. Someone had loved me. Even if she'd been gone for 25 years, even if I barely remembered her, she'd made sure I was taken care of. I donated the entire amount to charities supporting children in abusive families. Now I'm 35. David and I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. We live in a beautiful home in the suburbs, and I run my company from a home office 3 days a week so I can be present for my kids. I'm worth $50 million, and I've built a life that's full of love, success, and peace. I never see my parents. I heard Mom had a stroke last year. I sent flowers to the hospital, unsigned. I heard Claire is engaged to someone she met online, another person she's probably planning to use and discard. I heard Dad is working part-time at a Walmart now, his law career long over. I heard all of this, and I wished them well in my heart, but I didn't reach out. Some bridges are burned for good reason. Sometimes David asks me if I ever regret it. The revenge, the ruthlessness, the way I systematically dismantled their lives. I tell him the truth, no. Because here's what I learned from dying and being reborn. You don't owe kindness to people who were cruel to you. You don't owe forgiveness to people who never asked for it. And you don't owe loyalty to family who treated you like garbage. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving. It's thriving so spectacularly that your abusers can see exactly what they lost when they chose to hurt you. I learned that justice isn't always served by the courts or by fate. Sometimes you have to serve it yourself. And I learned that the little girl who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and nearly murdered twice had more power than anyone ever gave her credit for. My sister used my conditioner, mixed it with poison, and tried to kill me. But I came back stronger, smarter, and completely beyond her reach. And now, every time I walk past a beauty salon, the kind of high-end salon Claire could never afford, even in her best days, I smile and think about that champagne glass and that wedding reception and the moment I watched her plans crumble into dust. She wanted everything I had. Instead, she lost everything she was. That's justice. That's revenge. That's rebirth.